The world is waking up to a new geopolitical reality, one that could redefine the global balance of power. On Saturday, Iran officially announced the termination of the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the international nuclear agreement that for a decade had stood as one of the last diplomatic barriers preventing Tehran from developing atomic weapons. With this announcement, Iran declared that it was no longer bound by any restrictions on its nuclear program. In a formal statement, Tehran's foreign ministry said, "All of the provisions of the 2015 deal, including the restrictions on the Iranian nuclear program and the related mechanisms, are considered terminated." Yet, in a tone that tried to project calm, the statement added that Iran firmly expresses its commitment to diplomacy. But diplomacy has never seemed more fragile. The JCPOA was once hailed as a historic breakthrough. Signed in Vienna in July 2015, it brought together world powers, Iran, the United States, China, Russia, France, Britain, and Germany, in an ambitious effort to end more than a decade of tension over Tehran's nuclear ambitions. Under the terms of the deal, Iran agreed to limit its uranium enrichment to 3.67% purity, far below the 90% threshold needed for a nuclear weapon. It also capped its stockpile at 300 kilograms of low-enriched uranium and agreed to reduce the number of operating centrifuges from nearly 20,000 to just over 5,000. In return, the world lifted crippling international sanctions that had crushed Iran's economy, freeing tens of billions of dollars in frozen assets and reopening global oil markets to Iranian exports. For a while, the deal worked. The International Atomic Energy Agency repeatedly confirmed Iran's compliance. Barack Obama, who led the US into the deal, called it a victory for diplomacy, peace, and global security. But that peace was short-lived. In May 2018, then US President Donald Trump unilaterally withdrew from the JCPOA, calling it a terrible, one-sided deal that should have never been made. Defying his European allies, Trump reinstated harsh economic sanctions targeting Iran's oil exports, banking sector, and foreign reserves, effectively pushing Tehran's economy into freefall. At the time, Iran's oil exports, which had peaked at 2.5 million barrels per day under the deal, plummeted to less than 400,000 barrels per day. The Iranian rial collapsed, losing more than 70% of its value, and inflation soared past 45%, sparking domestic unrest. Trump's decision was influenced heavily by Israel, Iran's regional rival, which had long argued that the JCPOA merely delayed Tehran's path to a bomb rather than stopping it. Then Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu lobbied hard for Trump's withdrawal, presenting what he claimed was secret intelligence proving Iran's deception, though international inspectors disputed those claims. As the US pulled out, Iran began incrementally breaching the deal's limits, enriching uranium beyond the agreed levels, and installing advanced centrifuges banned under the JCPOA. By 2022, Iran had reportedly enriched uranium to 60% purity, an unprecedented level for the country, and enough to bring it just weeks away from weapons-grade material if it chose to go further. European powers, Britain, France, and Germany tried desperately to save the deal. They launched the INSTEX trade mechanism to allow limited humanitarian trade with Iran despite US sanctions. But Washington's maximum pressure campaign effectively froze all major financial channels, and European companies pulled out of Iran in fear of US penalties. Repeated rounds of talks in Vienna and Doha from 2021 to 2023 failed to revive the agreement. Iran demanded that all sanctions be lifted and that Washington guarantee it would never again withdraw from a future deal, a promise the US could not legally make. Meanwhile, tensions spiraled further this year. In June 2025, a 12-day bombing campaign by Israel and the United States targeted Iranian nuclear and military facilities following attacks on US bases in Iraq and Syria. The strikes killed dozens of Iranian personnel and crippled parts of Iran's centrifuge network, but they also hardened Tehran's stance. In response, Iran's parliament passed a bill cutting all cooperation with the IAEA, the UN's nuclear watchdog. The move effectively blinded international inspectors to Iran's nuclear activities for the first time in nearly 2 decades. As a result, Britain, France, and Germany invoked the JCPOA's snapback mechanism, a clause allowing the rapid reinstatement of all UN sanctions if Iran violates the deal. That process, finalized in September 2025, reinstated sanctions that had been lifted under UN Security Council Resolution 2231, including bans on missile testing, nuclear-related trade, and arms imports. Termination Day, set for October 18, 2025, was supposed to mark the formal end of these restrictions, a symbolic moment when Iran would rejoin the global economic system. Instead, it became the day the nuclear deal officially died. Despite the tension, diplomacy isn't entirely dead. Just this week, Donald Trump, now back in office, told reporters that he wants a peace deal with Iran and believes a new agreement could be reached through strength and respect. Tehran, for its part, has said it remains open to talks, but only if Washington guarantees non-aggression and commits to lifting illegal sanctions. Europe, too, has expressed cautious hope. The foreign ministers of Britain, France, and Germany issued a joint statement saying they would pursue a comprehensive, durable, and verifiable agreement to ensure Iran never acquires a nuclear weapon. Yet on the ground, the prospects are bleak. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi declared last week that his government sees no reason to negotiate with Europe, given their activation of the snapback sanctions. The consequences of this collapse could be far-reaching. Without the JCPOA, Iran faces renewed isolation and potentially crippling economic pressure. Yet it also gains freedom to expand its nuclear program without formal limits. Analysts warn that Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium now exceeds 5,000 kilograms, enough for several nuclear warheads if further refined. This development threatens to spark a regional arms race. Israel has already vowed to take any action necessary to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, both wary of Tehran's power, have hinted at pursuing nuclear capabilities of their own if Iran crosses the threshold. For Washington, the death of the JCPOA represents both a strategic failure and a renewed challenge. The US is now stretched thin, managing crises in Ukraine, East Asia, and the Middle East simultaneously. A nuclear crisis with Iran could pull resources and attention away from other theaters. Iran, meanwhile, appears determined to project strength. Billboards in Tehran show images of centrifuges and portraits of nuclear scientists assassinated in Israeli operations. State media hails the end of the JCPOA as a Ashtar liberation from Western deceit. But beneath the rhetoric, Iran's economy remains fragile. Inflation stands above 50%, unemployment continues to rise, and the real's value is near historic lows. Public frustration simmers as sanctions choke industries and international investment remains out of reach. The leadership in Tehran hopes that maintaining a defiant nuclear posture will strengthen its bargaining hand. Whether that gamble pays off or plunges the region into deeper instability remains to be seen. As one European diplomat put it bluntly this week, the world is back to 2012, but with higher stakes, fewer options, and much less trust.